Hello, and welcome to Shatter Our Souls with Novari. Now, today we are tackling Blacklist number 1, Razor's batch of Tollbooth Time Trials. It is, in fact, the final batch of time trials for the entirety of the game. And honestly, I'm surprised and ecstatic that we are at this point in the game. Because, truth be told, I didn't expect that this series that I had started was going to be going on for a total of a year. And am excited to say that we're closing this out within the next little while. Now, about, I want to say 6 months ago, when I was dealing with Blacklist number 8, I built this car. The car was designed as a little bit of a joke because having the hot pink Lexus was one of those questionable decisions I had made in some way, shape, or form. But I have to say, the color of it on it has grown on me, and I admit that I'd probably do the same thing again just for pure aesthetic again at a later point in time. Now, knowing a little bit about the game and what it is, what it was meant to be, I can appreciate that Need for Speed Most Wanted had a lot going for it. That it showed up as one of the best racing games of the time, and to this day continues to be one of the best racing games of the time, of all time. There's something to be said about how the game's world fits together, how the vehicles are these pillars of the whatchamacallit, of the tuner class of vehicles, but also that every vehicle is distinct enough that you're not questioning which car it is you're racing against. I think that's something that later racing games, notably some like, I'm going to point a finger here, like Forza, kind of missed the mark on. Yes, Forza has thousands of cars, and picking just one is incredibly difficult. And that, I get, is the point of Forza in some way, shape, or form, to make any car you could think of a race car. This takes a much more fine tuned approach to it and says, yeah, any car could be a race car, but these ones are iconic. And I definitely think that's something to bring forward when talking about this game, is that the car selection was intentional. If we were to make the game again, I guess now 20 years later, it would be a totally different ball game trying to pick the cars that you would choose, and I would probably pick the Tesla out of irony, if I'm being completely honest. But I can see a lot of different vehicles having a unique take on how the game would function and operate. I don't think that they'd, triple the roster or anything like that, but have a couple oddballs in there that are simply there for the sake of novelty. I could get behind that. But Need for Speed is known for good gameplay, good physics, and a so-so cast of vehicles. Not exponentially crazy, but a decent amount that you can find something for everyone in there. Personally, I'm partial towards the Corvette, the Lotus Elise, and the Lamborghini Gallardo or Murcielago, depending on which version of the games that or which version of the car is available. If none of that is, I'd go for the Skyline. Not much for the RX-7, but it's and something that I guess could be something for later me to get into. But let's face it, the game is coming to a close. There are 12 challenges race-wise that are left in total. And 3 of those 12 are toll booth time trials. The first is this somewhat shorter one, being about a 4.5 to 5 minute race. And honestly, this one's pretty simple. It tends to focus more so on the city of Ow. I'm glad that the airbag's deployed. The city of Rockport. The second one is absolutely a behemoth. This race is approximately 8 minutes, if my memory serves based on what the challenge series had for it. This race has 12 separate toll booths to go through, making it easily one of, if not the longest basic end-to-end track in the game. And because it is the longest, it goes through every single region of the game in some capacity or another, making it kind of what I would consider to be a victory lap of the game. It's meant to show off just how far you've come, where you've been, and where you're going. It's meant to be a confidence booster. You've done all this already, you can take Razor, right? And so, if you look at it from a developmental point, it is meant to make the player feel powerful. It is meant to make you feel a little bit nostalgic in this moment. And it is meant to show the evolution of the player. After all, this is where you met Blacklist number 14, Taz. And you raced on these tracks with Sunny. You know this city, and you've been doing it for a while. In some cases, people have probably only played it for about maybe a month if they've been going at it non-stop. I myself don't have a hard drive big enough to handle this whole game in a month, so it's been a year. But a year for me has shown off a lot. I remember this race being one of the hardest in the game, and now I feel like I could breeze through it with any vehicle without any concerns. There's a level of growth throughout the game that really shows off what the developers were aiming for. And I can say that I look forward to the next run through this set of courses. I look forward to seeing what the next game would bring. Need for Speed Carbon has, I think, has some pretty big shoes to fill compared to its predecessor. Where Most Wanted was following the coattails of Hot Pursuit, of Underground and Underground 2. Carbon's following Need for Speed Most Wanted. Most Wanted is and will always be one of the most iconic in the franchise. Anywho, we're about, I'd say, about a third of the way through this beast of a track, and we've hit Rockport. And one thing that kind of bugs me about Rockport, the Rockport side of things, or of the world, is that some of the buildings in Rockport are not consistent. One side of the building is a clock, the other side is a broken down, disheveled, almost falling apart building. And it kind of bugs me that there's those two very separate viewpoints on it. I know that it's just a one game, a random building, but it is one of the few points that breaks immersion for me, because if you've played the game a lot, it acts as a landmark in both sides, or on both sides of the building, as you travel underneath it. But it loses itself, its sense of identity, because you lose track of which building it is if you haven't paid enough attention to realize it's the same building on both sides. It's my 2 cents on it. You can agree or disagree to your heart's content, but that's what I've experienced so far. Now, Razor as a challenger is one of those characters that has a lot going for him. He has your old car. And I admit that the BMW M3 GTR is one of those cars that I wish I could use right off the get-go. It's one of those cars that if I could beat the entire game start to finish with, I would. Unfortunately, it being the 33rd car and a random vehicle that you cannot get just on a whim, it's very difficult to actually sit down and say, yeah, I can do this. And so, with that, I'd love to say that there are other vehicles that fit the bill. Nothing really fits that car. It's very unique in and of itself. I would like to have more time with it, but I think that's a video or series for another day. Who knows? Maybe something will crop up. Anywho, we're over halfway through this monstrosity, and as I stated, it takes you everywhere. Now down to Camden Beach and the edge of the track as a whole. And honestly, it's, as I said, it's your victory lap. This shows off just how far you've come, how much you've grown, and this victory lap also showcases that you can handle anything that gets thrown your way with whatever vehicle you happen to have. At this point in the game, every vehicle has all of their upgrades unlocked by a fair margin. There's only one vehicle you can't access, and you've already faced off against the Ronnie and Bull, one of which who had an Aston Martin DB9, and the other one had a McLaren. So, like, there's so much that could happen. There's so much that they could have done with it. And you're kind of left wondering, well, what's next? They can't really up the ante much from here. And so, I feel as though Need for Speed Most Wanted is one of those games that, after you've beaten it, has, ow, thank you for deploying airbags. Once you've beaten the game, has a lot of replayability to it. Admittedly, I feel like this is the last time I will play through the story of the game. I have a backlog a mile long at this point, so I feel as though this will be the last I play the game with the intention of beating the game once more. Instead, I'm going to focus more so on smaller challenges. How fast can I beat each track with a specific car? And using that to build up a tier list for a now 20-year-old game. It's not going to be rocket surgery or anything like that, but it will give a little bit more longevity to a game that is ages old at this point. I don't know. Tell me what you think down in the comments. Are you looking forward to the final race against Razor? Are you thinking that perhaps I'm overshooting my expectations and this is just kind of fade into obscurity at some point? Let me know. I personally have my feeling that this game will never truly disappear, that it will exist in some capacity for ever, and be one of the icons of the racing genre forever. But what do I know, right? Ow. Okay, note to self. Get new airbags. Alright, so this is the last of the time trials. It has 9 toll booths and is roughly the same length as the prior one. The difference between this and the previous race is that this one is all about, how do I put this? It's a little bit more windy in terms of how the track is developed and how it functions. It'll skip one or two toll booths in favor of longer, harder to react to pathways through the city. And so, in that way, this is a mirror, an echo of sorts to the prior race, while using every conceivable path that the one before it did not. These two races, for all intents and purposes, are the biggest, hardest, need to know your way around the city, the best races out of every race in this game. And I like that about it. I feel as though not many games can say that they have tracks that act in this way. Need for Speed Underground certainly didn't. Although it had a couple really good tracks like the Terminal, which had a longer than average lap and took you through numerous locations throughout the city and of, I think it was Atlantica in Underground. There wasn't anything that truly connected the world the way that this track does. And Need for Speed Carbon, as well as we could take a step further into Pro Street, Carbon didn't really have or had four separate locations that each functioned on their own as individual areas of the game. But none of them actually had the cohesion to them that this does. Yes, Need for Speed Most Wanted has the three major boroughs, the three major locations in the world, but the tracks interweave between the three locations. I wouldn't say seamlessly, but they do weave in and out fairly consistently. Whereas the boroughs or the four major areas of the Palmont City in Carbon, Palmont City's four boroughs never interlocked, never interconnect. If you don't do free roam, you would never realize or never actually see how the various areas of the world actually interconnect and connect to one another. And so, in a way, that's yet another way that Need for Speed Most Wanted shows exactly why it's the best, or exactly why the world feels better and more connected than others. It's because even the races interconnect the world in ways that leave very little room for interpretation. This world is interconnected. This world makes sense. The only section of the world that doesn't is the fact that there's only one road into Rockport. And that one road happens to be blocked off right now as you play through the game. Need for Speed Pro Street, I believe it was 2006, 2007. I could be wrong, don't quote me on it. But Pro Street had more cities, more races, more locations that you could race in than anything prior. And yes, every time you went to a location, it added more and made the races bigger or interconnected different sections of the tracks. But they never actually went above and beyond to make each section of the track unique, to make each area interconnect the way that the street racing games did. Now, this isn't to say that I think that the street racing games are superior, but there is something to be said for being able to play the game and actually have the interconnected world that the street racing ones do, that the standardized tracks simply cannot match. Anywho, we're about halfway down the race. The police have decided that I'm public enemy number, I suppose, number 3? Number 1? I don't know. Point being, I am public enemy number something or another. And this track, already one of the longest out there, is going to be lengthened by the fact that the police will not let up, and I sincerely expect that they shouldn't. I mean, I'm one of those individuals that's been a thorn in their backside for a year. They deserve a little bit of retribution, don't they? Next toll booth in 2 minutes. Wait, 2 minutes? Oofty. Okay, yeah, there are times where I forget just how big this world is and how far in between each location there is. This is one of those times where it definitely shows the size of the world as a whole. Yes, I did. And I intend to continue to fly past these police out forevermore. Because I don't want the game to ever get to the point of being mundane or consistent. I want the game to throw everything it has at me. And if I could mod the game to have heat level 20, I certainly would. I wouldn't, I would probably absolutely miserably fail against it. That is fantastic. Um, so, for those of you that might not have seen it, the police vehicle got caught off guard and got launched into the air sideways and did a barrel roll, ultimately ending up in the vehicle being destroyed. Admittedly, I would like to see something like that again, but it's one of those things that is a staple of Need for Speed Most Wanted and not many other games out there. Anywho, I had my fun. They've had their fun. It's time to finish off this race and get away from the police. I don't mind the chases, but after having played the game as much as I have and gotten used to the AI of the police as well as of the racers, I'm realizing that they kind of fall into certain scripts. The racers fall into one of what I'll call 4 basic scripts. They're either designed to be follow the set path as best they can. There's the boss AI, which is meant to challenge you the best they can, but often kind of fall a little bit behind. There's the drag race AI, which is meant to go absolutely as hard as they can, but linger back a bit because your main issue is not the racers. Your main issue is the traffic. And if you can't duck, dodge, dip, dive, and dodge your way through the traffic fast enough, you will end up getting yourself caught. Or, they'll fly ahead. But they're more, I guess you could say they are more reserved in their approach when it comes to drag races. And then there is what I'll call the speed trap races, where the AI is significantly stronger than anything prior, but also have a tendency to lose traction or mess up right around the points of interest, so that you need to be better at all of the points of interest than what your opponents would be, and you still have to really push yourself and your vehicle to be able to make it to the end fast enough that you don't lose too many points. Effectively, make sure you're doing yourself justice and doing the job right the first time. At least that's what it looks like to me. Anywho, these guys are a little too close for comfort, so I think I'm going to take a brief dip away. We're going to head through the baseball diamonds, which, if you don't know, there are 2 major locations in the game that I use rather liberally. to get away from the police. The first is the baseball diamonds, the stadium itself. And the reason is because if I'm fast enough, I can trick the AI into getting stuck inside the baseball diamond itself. And the other one is the loop around the college, which admittedly is just a easy loop that I can keep going infinitely, which allows me to focus more so on racking up certain infractions easier than anywhere else in the city. It's harder for the police to chase after you throughout the city, or if you're going in that loop, which sounds very counterintuitive, but that's just how the game runs, I guess. Anywho, we're going to finish this off with one of the sprint races, because as much as I like the sprint races in general, there are 12 races prior to challenging Razor, and I want to have as many of them done as possible within the next little bit so that Razor can be challenged one-on-one for the final battle. I'm thinking the finale is probably going to be a little bit on the longer side, just because of everything else that goes into it. But, oh well, I'm more than happy to show it off. Tyson with the Corvette is showing off a little bit of why he's late game material. And also, gotta say, I love the pink Corvette. I can't imagine a better color to finish this off. Showboating a little bit, you know? We're about halfway through the race. We got, looks like a Subaru Impreza. If he keeps this up, he might be driving backwards. Yeah, maybe I can get him. Let's see if I... Nah. There's no point in getting him with the, pursuit breakers. It's not really gonna do anything major, anyways. And keeping him at arm's length like this is gonna help out in some capacity. Admittedly, I don't recognize that vehicle, although I should. Yeah. Not the end of the world, I suppose. Got a hairpin turn, and ow. Once again, I'm glad I have airbags in this thing. You know, if this were real life driving, the amount of money you make for each race wouldn't even compensate for the tires, let alone the number of airbag deploys, front bumpers, oil changes, brakes, nitrous oxide tanks that are magically refillable, brand new engines, front, back, side, windows, glass, you name it. Everything that goes into a vehicle would be replaced on a virtually daily basis. And the amount of money you make for each race would be absolutely pitiful to the amount of damage that is done on a race-by-race basis in this game. But, you know, who knows? Maybe that's just me looking too much into it. But I figure with every time that I drove through a police roadblock, there would be a totaled car. And I already know I drove through a lot of roadblocks, which is a lot of totaled cars. Anyways, if you like what you see, drop a like, leave a subscribe. We'll catch you next time. Until then, have a good one.